You know what time it is, Jeff? It's time for Claudia and Friends.
All right.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Claudia Thomas on, which she is the ringleader for the 9-11 Rescue Workers and Friends.org, which is all about the people that were first responders to the 9/11 event back in the day. So welcome, Claudia.
Thank you again for having us. I have two more very special guests with us today. But before we get started, today is a very special day in history as well. And so we want to take a moment to remember the Pearl Harbor attack, which was certainly in many ways a liken to what we went through on 9/11. So we love our veterans so much. We had many military that came to the site to help out, and we just want to let those beautiful World War II Pearl Harbor folks know that we're thinking of them too today.
Well, I appreciate you doing that. I did pull up the video for Pearl Harbor on YouTube, and I posted that on ReaganRadioNetwork.com as well. It's about 40 minutes long, and it's really a real education for what kind of planning went in place for the Japanese to bomb Pearl Harbor. And to me, it's a wake-up call for us every single year to watch that, to be aware that people want to see harm to some of our cities. So way to be there, Claudia. Appreciate you doing that.
Well, thank you for all that you do also. So to get started, I have two friends on. Mr. David Johnson, who is with the FDNY EMS on 9/11. David, are you there?
I'm here.
Great. And then we also have an MTA sergeant, Jack Meehan, who also was there on site. And they both have some incredible stories, and I'll just leave it to them to explain their role. We'll start out with David and talk about FDNY EMS, because the Emergency Medical Services Bureau is very important, and it gets kind of mixed in all the time with FDNY, and the firefighters and the EMS are two separate entities, two separate components under the same umbrella organization. So, Dave, maybe you can talk a little bit about your experience and what you did at the site and beyond, because you can talk about the landfill also, which a lot of folks probably don't know much about here.
Well, I started 9/11. I was out on line of duty injury and watched it on TV like most people did, and sitting there wondering how many friends of mine, buildings collapsed, went with them. I went to light duty after that, and my first experience with the Trade Center was I was assigned to clean an ambulance out that was caked in the dust. There was inches of it in the compartment. Finally, another supervisor who saw me doing that told me to stop and get away from it because they didn't know what was in the dust at that time. In December of that year, I went full duty, and I worked, like I said, the dedicated ambulance up at the landfill, and our duties up there were to help anyone that was doing the sifting or that was working around any of the debris. If they got hurt, we would patch them up, and then we'd call for another ambulance to come and take them to the hospital. It was a very eerie place. It was surreal in a way because of all the things that were going on and the devastation that was coming there from the Trade Center towers. On one end of the landfill, they had all the destroyed vehicles, the fire engines and the ambulances, police cars, other vehicles that were there. And on the other end, but where we sat was where the pile was, where they went through the sifting of the debris.
And the debris was taken over to Staten Island. Is that what I'm understanding, David?
Yes, some of it was going by truck, and others, the rest of it was going in by barges through the different channels there.
So you were around the residue, or the lack of better words, the contamination of the debris for quite a while then.
I worked up there from December till July when they finished all the operations up there.
Okay, so you're looking at...
So you were there even beyond the close date of May 30th?
Yeah, they were still getting rid of some of the debris, moving things out. Some of the vehicles went to the different museums, the museum upstate in New York and the museum down in the World Trade Center. Okay, so I was working at the landfill, and like I said, we were up there basically to provide first aid to any of the police officers, the firefighters, anybody that was working in the sifting of the debris. If they were injured while doing that, we would treat them, and then an ambulance would come up and transport them. We stayed up there the whole time.
And how long did you actually spend at the site then?
I put in over 250 hours up there.
Right, that was over at the Staten Island.
On the landfill, yes.
Right. Maybe you could explain, because a lot of folks don't know about that part of the process and the contamination and everything that you were exposed to over there, along with all the other fellows that were over there and ladies. So maybe you can give an idea of what the landfill was about and how everything was being transported over there to be sifted through.
Well, the setup that they had there, the ambulance that was parked about 50 feet from the piles that they were picking up and putting into the sifters, and the debris would come in on the barges down below, maybe a mile away, and they would be trucked up to the spot where they were doing the sifting. All the large debris would be put on one side, the stuff that couldn't be sifted by hand, and the smaller stuff went into the sifters with the guys that were doing the work on that.
So they were, basically, from what I've heard, like walking in that mud and that dust. It was the same as if you were working right over in downtown New York City.
There was a constant wind blowing up there all the time. It never stopped. And the roads were gray. The mud turned to gray from the dust.
And they had those barges were started heading out. Was it the next day on the 12th that they actually started heading the barges over to Staten Island to it's called the Fresh Kills Landfill?
Yes, they started that right away.
And that was pretty much never ending for quite some time, wasn't it? I mean, when did they actually not have to be sending barges over that way?
Probably it ended in around May.
Yeah.
They were done sifting the debris by that time.
So in some of the items that I know of that would have been in the debris, to kind of give the listeners an idea of this, you would have been finding personal items, driver's licenses, phones, different items that would have been in those buildings when they came down. The steel was sent over there along with all the machinery, such as like you mentioned, the ambulances that were crushed, or the fire trucks that were crushed, police vehicles that were crushed, other vehicles, personal vehicles that were in the area. So everything went over on barge to the Staten Island landfill. And then these folks set up an operation over there where they were sifting through that very respectfully and with a lot of dignity, gathering all of these personal items so that they could be returned, and as well as being used as evidence in the criminal portion of the attacks. Did I sum that up okay, Dave?
That's exactly what it was. They had a trailer that NYPD had set up, and all the personal items that were found were brought to that trailer. We were allowed to see some of the things that they had there, and it was, like you said, people's IDs and personal items, wallets. There were also guns that they found from different police officers that were lost in the trade center. And that's basically what it was.
And as we know too, they were also searching for human remains that may have gotten mixed up in all of that.
Yeah, that was the main thing that they were sifting for, was any remains that they could find, so they could do DNA tests on it to see who it was.
Yeah. How long were you with EMS, Dave?
I worked for them for 27 years. First, New York City EMS from 85 to 96, and then we had the merge with the fire department then, and worked until 2012. And I retired.
Boy, I bet you saw a lot of stuff, but nothing like 9/11.
Every day it's a different adventure. Just when you thought you saw something that you never would see again, you see something that tops it.
Mm-hmm. And do you recall when you were actually like over at the World Trade Center site, did you do many transports of injured or anything?
We had just minor cuts type things and nothing major. They were very careful with the way they sifted the debris and how everything was handled. Anything larger was handled by big machinery, the steel and any of the metal that they found. They mostly sifted through the smaller debris.
Yeah, that's hard duty. And you were there a very long time and exposed to all the contaminants, the same contaminants that were carried over, of course, from downtown. And that's what the folks at the landfill, and I know you've taken some very hard hits as far as losses of EMS personnel that have died since 9/11 from related illnesses. Let me talk to Jack here for a minute. Jack was a sergeant with the MTA, and Jack, a lot of folks aren't going to understand MTA or how that kind of system works. So if you could explain first what MTA is and how you fit into the system there in New York, that would be really helpful.
Sure thing. I worked for the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. It is the largest public agency, transportation agency in the United States. It handles about 11 million customers. I was in the Bridge and Tunnel Division that operates 9 facilities. That's 7 bridges and 2 tunnels. They handle about 1 million people per day, I would say. Right now, they have 1,000 officers. I think back then they had about 500 officers at the time I was there. I was a sergeant. I was assigned to the Battery Tunnel on September 1st. And I had worked September 10th at midnight. I was always on the midnight tour, 10 p. to 6 a.m. tour. So September 10th, I came on the morning of the September 11th. I came home, went to bed about 7 o'clock. My wife woke me up, said that a plane had hit the trade center. So I knew it was bad because ever since I was in EMS before I went to MTA, and they always told us that was the prime target for them to hit. So I got pretty nervous. I went outside, and I was on my back deck, and about a half hour later, I heard this roar coming through. And I looked up. It was one of those jets that was from, I think it was out of Massachusetts. I think Otis Air Force Base. It was an F-15. That guy was hauling, and it rumbled the whole house. So I knew things were pretty bad. So I called the facility, and they told me to come in, that they had things covered for now, but to come in early, come in at 6 p.m. So that's what I did. I went in at 6 p.m. They had the streets closed. The highway was closed. They had NYPD highway patrol about every half a mile. You had to show your ID to get there. So I finally got to the facility. What people don't know is that when this happened, when the World Trade Center did go down, that the tunnels going into Manhattan was full of cars, because once it happened, there was nowhere for the people to go. So it just clogged up from the portal entrance all the way back. So they had thousands and thousands of vehicles. Some of them had no keys in them. And the facility itself had 2 wreckers. I think they had 3 at the time. So there was hours spent trying to clear that tunnel so they could get emergency personnel in there. So when I got there, it was pretty chaotic. So they had help from NYPD, which had the catch and grab wreckers that you didn't even have to get out of the truck. You just hooked up the car and get out. So they finally did clear all that. And I was on West Street. I was assigned as a security supervisor on the West Street portal in Manhattan, which is 2 small blocks from the Trade Center. So, of course, we had to initiate all these security checkpoints, and it was out in the weather all day, every day, 16-hour tours. I mean, I don't think I was home. I was there 8 months. I didn't get out of there until well into the next year, and the trucks, in the weeks following, the amount of tractor trailers that were taking the debris out of there was amazing. I mean, you would look up West Street from the entrance. As far as the eye could see, there were tractor trailers waiting to go into the site to pick up the debris and then come through the tunnel. I mean, and some of them were flying. They were the debris coming off that truck that had just come from the site. It was like a snowstorm. When you stood there, the ground was saturated with that dusty gray stuff that's clung to your clothes, and the cars were full of it. And it was rough. In 08, I was determined I had prostate cancer, and I've had about 4 surgeries for skin cancer on my face and arms. And I got to say, the people that were there, the MTA, the people of the MTA, and everybody else, they gave 200%. I mean, we had people that lived in upstate New York that worked there, and they never got to go home because they were working 16 hours, and if they went home, they would be home for a 4-hour sleep. So the locker rooms turned into, they had cots all over. People were sleeping there for weeks and weeks and months. I mean, they really gave their all, I'm telling you.
Yeah, and it's nice to hear an MTA sergeant, because there's so many agencies that went in to help out, and we're generally here, NYPD, FDNY, even Port Authority, but very rarely are we hearing, of the EMS or the DSNY guys that went in, or MTA, or there's all these other agencies. Of course, we had Red Cross and construction workers from all different locals that went in to help out, and this program is allowing to get that word out, that there were an awful lot of people there from all over the country, including folks like yourselves, that this was your job that day.
Right.
And, you're basically law enforcement. That's what I want people to understand. MTA, being a sergeant's the same as being like an NYPD.
Oh, yeah, well, peace officers, the only difference, we can't arrest on a warrant. We have to see the crime committed. Right now, the MTA Bridges and Tunnels has a special operations unit, which I joined after that, and they have a highway unit that enforces the BTL laws. But security was always a thing with the MTA, but after, of course, 2001, it became the priority. And back at that time, we didn't even have a centralized command center yet. It was only a part-time thing where, in case of disasters, they would have it. But I have to say, we had a chief named James Fortunato that had the insight to start this command center, and he got it up and running within days, and it just expanded into, thank God we had that, because it could take all the information and sift it out and then give it out to the different divisions that were there. Without that, I don't know how we would have got through.
Yeah.
And, I have a couple stories. I'd like to just say that night I was there, I was on West Street, and I was supervising, and I see this guy coming out of the dust, and he's in mine worker uniform, with the tools and everything. And I said, "Oh, wait, what do you need?" He says, Sergeant, I just drove from Ohio, and I want to help." I couldn't believe it. So I personally walked him through the gate into the site. I mean, it happened all the time. People from all over just driving there. On the way up there, he was telling me that he had a family. He had 2 children and a wife that he just left because he felt the need to help. I mean, it was incredible that people would give up. They gave up their whole lives to help.
Truly beautiful people coming in from all over the country.
Yeah. Another thing that happened to me was that night in the dust. They were on emergency power at the portal entrance because they had lost all power, and they had generators going. So there was spots of bright light and spots of darkness. So you really had to watch where you're going, because the dust there, it was up to your ankles. As I'm walking through this gray black dust, I see color in the dust. So I pick up. It was a picture. A Kodak picture of a woman on a beach. It looked like in the Bahamas with, I guess, with her husband or her boyfriend. and it was so vibrant, the color, compared to all the rest of the darkness. And I'm thinking, this must have blown out of the World Trade Center and landed 2 blocks away, and landed in the dust. It was amazing. I really, and I was thinking, probably either him or her might be dead right now, you know?
Yeah, that's a heavy burden to bear when you're going through that stuff, just like over the landfill and seeing all those personal items. It's drama. It's traumatic.
Yeah.
You know, I talked to friends over at in Brooklyn. I have friends over there that run Greenwood Cemetery, which I know you guys will be familiar with. It's an absolutely beautiful and serene and very well kept place. And I went over and visited with some friends there, and they told me how they were collecting boxes and boxes full of papers that were blown over to Brooklyn.
Yeah, you know, it was really strange that night. The amount of, it was even reams of paper in the air, you know, like from a computer with the holes on the sides. It was just blowing all over. And at the site that night, there was still the roofs of buildings, like the Verizon building. They were still in flames on the roofs. And this was 8 o'clock at night. I did go by the plane engine that was there. It had like a sheet over it that was blown, so I could see half of it. And it was amazing. But they really got their stuff together there. It took them, you know, a couple days, but after that, things were going very well. And I have to give a lot of credit to all those agencies that really chipped in. I mean, anything you needed, you got right away.
Maybe you can explain where the battery tunnel, since that's what you were talking about there, where that leads to, so folks kind of get a picture of that.
Oh, sure. It's 3 miles long. It consists of 2 tubes, 2 lanes each tube, one going in, one coming out. It goes from Brooklyn, New York, to downtown Manhattan. It leaves you off 2 blocks from the Trade Center. I think it was built in the 50s. And
it's a lovely tunnel.
Yeah, the tunnel, yeah. That's one of the 2 tunnels that they operate. The other one is the Queens Midtown, which goes from Manhattan to Queens, New York.
Well, I remember when, our headquarters for Port Authority was over in Jersey City, and then we had, other bases over there in New York, too, by the site. But I'd meet up with the teams over in Jersey City, and they would take us through the Holland Tunnel, which, is operated by the Port Authority. Mm-hmm. And they had the Holland Tunnel shut down for weeks, to keep it open for emergency materials and responders to get through. And as a Jersey girl who always went through that tunnel, as growing up, to get over into the city, it was such a surreal experience to see it empty. And I never gave thought to, like you're saying, I'm sure they had the same situation in the Holland as you guys did with the battery tunnel.
Exactly. They had the tunnel closed, yes. It was closed until the next year, I think. It was closed for months, like 5 months, because what was happening, too, was that with all the dust and everything, but the trucks that were going through, when the load would shift in the tractor-trailer, they were all open box trailers, that the girders would shift in the truck, and it would pop up and rip the roofs off. So maintenance, it was a constant maintenance thing where we had a checkpoint there to check for loads, but still with the rattling and everything, something would eventually pop out of that truck, and it destroyed the tunnels constantly. They had constant work on them.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, everybody's story deserves to be heard. And you fellas coming on today and sharing your stories is a blessing to all of those of our friends that aren't here to share theirs, because you're a witness for them. And I thank you so much for doing it, because I know it's hard.
My pleasure. Thank you for what you're doing.
Well, we're together. We're a formidable force. That's what I like to say. And we're going to get this Zadroga deal going. Now, before I go into some of the Zadroga updates, neither of you live in the New York area anymore, is that right?
That's true. I'm still in North Carolina. Go ahead, Dave.
I'm still on Staten Island.
You're still out on Staten Island? Yeah, so, And then, Jack, you're where?
I'm down in North Carolina. After the hormone therapy I had for my prostate cancer, I got very susceptible to cold. I can't take the cold. I get nauseous, so I had to go south. So I moved down to North Carolina after that.
well, David's living out in Staten Island still. And Jack, could you repeat what you said about North Carolina and why you went down there?
Sure. I moved down to North Carolina because I had a lot of hormone therapy to do with my prostate cancer. And after all that therapy, I couldn't take the cold anymore, which at work I lived in the cold, but I would get nauseous. So I had to go to a warmer climate. My doctor told me that they advised me to go down here. So I came down to North Carolina, even though my whole family is still up there. But I go back every now and then to see them.
Yeah, you have to pick the times that you go. I do the same thing. There's certain times of the year that I can't handle being back there with the humidity and other things that would bother my condition. And I was mentioning how we had Michelle Mason, who was NYPD, and she moved to Texas because of her health and, breathing-related issues. So there's a lot of folks that have had to move out of the area, as well as all those people that responded from out of the area initially. A lot of us have moved out of the area because of our health.
Right, yeah, it's true.
Yeah, but the droga reauthorization right now is looking a lot more positive. We had, as you guys know, we've had groups going down to D.C., several advocates and other groups have been going to D.C., including several of our members who've been giving us constant updates and reports, as they need things when they were down there. And they're supposed to be back down there this week, as I understand it, unless that's changed. And so right now, as things stand, Mitch McConnell has formally said, met with our responders, and we thank everybody for putting in all the phone calls, all the faxes. I know that Dave and Jeff on Reagan Radio had put out some messages for us too when we were calling for this last week, and all of that combined effort, I'm sure, made a huge difference because Mr. McConnell did meet with the responders, a team of 4 responders, and has agreed that we need a permanent passage of our health care component of the bill. We're still looking at a 5-year component extension of the compensation portions or components of the bill, but things are looking much better, and we hope, and we're calling on everybody to keep up those phone calls and get these folks, mainly it rests on McConnell and Paul Ryan, both who have now said publicly that they support us in a permanent reauthorization of our health care. So we need to continue our efforts until we actually get a vote, which we hope will be this week and will be attached. Currently, they're talking about attaching it to the omnibus bill because last week it didn't go through on the transportation bill. But they're looking at shutdowns, government shutdowns again, December 11th, and that's coming up. So we're hoping to be a part of that. We're getting real tired of our lives being played politics and political games, and we can go on and on and on about that. The bottom line is we need to vote now. The 2 big players in this, Mr. Ryan and Mr. McConnell, have publicly said that they support us. Now we want to see the action behind those words. Bring it to the floor, bring it to the vote. We have more than enough people on board, both in the Senate and in the House, to go ahead and pass these bills. So let's do it. Let's get it done. Let's roll. That's a very famous 9/11 phrase that we say, and that, we need to do that now. Let's roll. Let's get this done. So let's give us all like a Christmas without stress of wondering if our health care is still going to be there for us when the first of the year comes around. It's already been canceled out in October, and the funding's running out, so we need this now.
Absolutely. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, these people, Claudia's 9-11 Rescue Workers and Friends.org, that whole organization, which are 70-some thousand people associated with that. Is that right, Claudia?
Well, with our organization, we have getting close to 6,000 members, but we keep our membership pretty tight to keep it secure. And the program, and the health program, there's over 72,000 registered, over 33,000 with at least one, and actually more than one, health-related illness to their service on 9/11 and beyond. And we have over 4,200 with cancers right now. The numbers are just astronomical, but it's also a finite number. We're not talking about some of these other health care bills and that. We're talking about a finite amount of people that responded We have people that are sick. We certainly have people that are going to be getting sick. The cancers are really going to start coming on us here in the next few years. So all the more importance for having this health care legislation as a permanent extension. We need to take care of people. That's just the right American thing to do. There's people like Jack, and there's people like Dave, and there's people like me, and thousands of others, people in our group, family members. We've had so many people on the show that have shared their stories, and it's painful to do that, but they're doing it because it's important to be a witness for those who can't anymore, to share our stories, to let the world know what's going on in their lives now, that 9/11 didn't end on 9/11. It's still murdering us. It's making us sick. And, everybody likes to talk about how the bad guys win. When you live in fear and you don't go out on the streets, you don't do the normal activities you want to do. Well, the bad guys win when you don't take care of your own people, too.
That's right. I have to say, and I don't know if it's fair for me to mention this, but I read through a bunch of line item budget cuts that Paul Ryan has for the budget. And you look at those items, and my mind was thinking, well, they could have easily taken care of the 9/11 responders, as I read through all of these things. And I'm going, my goodness, the priorities are wrong. There needs to be a cultural change. You take care of those that take care of people. And that's
Absolutely.
that help to maintain, help to accomplish and maintain security for our country. And then you look through those things that that they're considering to take out of the budget, which they should, so there's money available for you guys that have gone beyond Call of Duty. So
I'm sorry.
No,
you look back, and the total cost of the cleanup downtown and Staten Island and all that, just for the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and Shanksville, was over $750 million. 3.1 million hours of labor it took just to clean up the World Trade Center debris. 1.8 million tons of debris. They put out back in 2001, everybody was real big and on board. They put in, I think President Bush promised $20 billion. $20 billion to help the New York City area recover from 9/11. And insurers paid out, a good chunk of that amount of money. But nobody was taking into account the lies that we were being told and all those people that were going to get sick later. And we're not asking for much here. We're really not. And you hit it right on, Dave, with the line item stuff. This is unconscionable that we put a dollar amount on a human life when these people went in and did the right thing from all over this country. And now they're sick. And we can't have a country that's morally and ethically deficient, because that is not the America that I grew up in.
What, to manage this year in and year out, and I don't know what the cost is. I mean, as a manager, you have to have some kind of an idea of cost to plan and to budget and to anticipate the cash flow for the needs of no matter what it is. Okay, you got to have that forward thinking. You got to have the dollars. Because that way the processors and everybody associated with the paperwork side of that to handle things, so that the people that the doctors and the technicians that help the first responders. Of course. You got to have that.
And that's where the CBO report comes in. The Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan, they put out their report, and they put out the figures. And the high end was $11 billion. And that was for a permanent compensation component. That's a pretty low amount. When you start looking at how they're throwing away money on certain items, as you're talking about, certain line items, it's like, why is that taking a priority over a possibility of a high end of $11 billion, and that's for lifetime. That's the next 25 years. So now we're talking back down. Some of the back and forth for the VCS portion is down to about $6.5 billion to make sure that's funded for the next 5 years.
I would ask
the healthcare program. That's not very much when you're looking at the big picture. So the dollar amounts have been put out there.
I would ask every listener and our listeners' friends and family to put themselves, and it's going to be impossible to do it, but I'm going to still ask them to put it in their mind for a while after listening to what Jack and David said today and what you said today, Claudia, and what your past guests have said. You know, to put yourself in their shoes. Okay, then all of a sudden you go out and you help folks, and you do it just for the kindness of the soul, and then you find out that, okay, the first responders were lied to, and there's contaminants on the site, and you start to feel ill, okay, or you're trying to be proactive with the concerns, and all of a sudden you find out that things aren't funded, and you did this. Put yourself in their shoes. And
it could be your sons or daughters. And, you know, we already just saw what happened with this last terrorist attack. You know, this is going to happen again. We have to be there for the people that are responding and going in. And then, especially in the case with 9/11, we were lied to. We were exposed to contaminants. What are we going to do if something like this happens again? And it's not even a matter of if, it's when. Are we going to stand up to the plate and do the right thing as Americans? Take care of our sons and daughters. Take care of our brothers and sisters, our parents, all these people that go in to help out. It's the right thing to do.
It is, because I mean, all your guests, every one of them, didn't ask. They just did. They just went. They acted immediately because there was a need. There's a lot of citizens in this country, me included, that watched from the television set, from the couch. Okay, I mean, I was working, but I was watching from the couch. You guys acted upon that. And there's a huge difference between those two. That to feel a little bit about what the first responders or what they're going through, and it's impossible to know for sure, because you know, you got to live it to know it, but at least try and put yourself in a position. Okay, you've got a respiratory issue going on, or there's a cancer issue going on, and there's what'd you say, 4,200 over
cancer.
Yeah. And Claudia communicates those that responded and have died from these contaminants on this property. Okay, she keeps track of that. And she lets folks know what's going on. And that's why Jeff and I, feel like this is hugely important, to feel a little bit, or as much as you possibly can, of the agony that these first responders are going through. I mean, I'm just blown away when I hear what you guys have done. And I'm going, okay, they acted. There's a big difference between action and sitting on a couch. It's huge.
And we need to get Mr. McConnell and Mr. Ryan off the couch and out there and get our bills to the floor and do it now. Don't let this go beyond this week. Let's have this done now. They have the power to do it. We have the support to do it. So let's just do it. Let's roll.
And it's not signed until it's signed.
Feed the cat.
What'd you say?
Tell them to get up and feed the cat.
There you go. There you go. I mean, it's you know,
and all three of us here have lost friends. All of us have lost friends, both then and since. And this is you know, you can throw around rhetoric and stuff, but it is the right, moral, ethical thing to do, to support those veterans, and that's what all of us are, that went to these sites. We're veterans. We may not have a military uniform on. Some of us did.
Jack and I
go ahead,
Claudia.
Go ahead, Dave.
Jack and I were talking on the phone last night. I worked with Jack back when he was part of EMS, and we were talking about people that we worked with and how they're doing, and I was just going down a list of all the ones that died from not only at 9/11, but also after, from the effects of the chemicals and the dust and everything else that they were exposed to. It was really sad.
It's very sad. We've over 1,800, by my count, over 1,800, and dozens of those were from the EMS and MTA. You know, we've all lost, all the different agencies have lost post 9/11 related friends.
And you were cleaning.
Horrible death.
I can't remember if it was David or if it was Jack that was cleaning out the back side of a emergency response vehicle, and then the supervisor says, "Stop that because you don't know what's in that dust." And I'm going, well, wow. And you had inches of dust in there, and you needed the vehicle, you needed it cleaned out because you needed to utilize it to take care of people. And so it's just that there's a lot of double-edged sword decisions. People need help. The vehicle needs to be cleaned out, but then there's the concern with the contaminants. But still, you need it to be able to service the community. I mean, there is just a lot of terrible things that there wasn't a good decision for the individual working, such as yourselves, no matter what you did. I mean, if you don't clean it out, you don't have a vehicle. If you do clean it out, you're likely to contaminate yourself. And if you don't clean it out, people aren't going to be helped. You have one less vehicle. So, I mean, and that may be an unfair thing, but that's what goes through my mind, trying to decide how you guys made your decisions live on the spot as things were developing. Can't imagine it. So, come on, folks.
What we do.
That's just what you do, isn't it? Ask questions later, just act. So.
Amen. That is what we do.
Well, guys, our prayers are with you. Anything else that you would like to say? I mean, I'm hearing from you, Claudia, that it's likely that McConnell and Ryan are going to get this. They're going to introduce this bill to the floor. It's going to be funded, and
that was the only item that was still up for discussion, was how they were going to fund it. And there have been plenty of different ideas spun around on just how that would be done. So there's no reason why they can't figure that out. I mean, you looked at the budget, you look at the line items. If they've got money to pour $43 million into a gas station in Afghanistan, come on. Surely they can take care of responders that did the right thing on 9/11 and beyond.
Well, I'm going to say it every single time because you're all in that category. The first responders, our military, law enforcement, the Border Patrol, all of our services that are out there, the people that have served the country and are having to deal with, in some geographical areas where the VA hospitals aren't operating on the up and up, it just should be clean. It just should be clean. And then, but I also will say, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm a business guy, okay? And in order to fully fund the priorities means that you can't fund everything. You got to protect the priorities. You got to protect it. The word no needs to come out. And unfortunately, these politicians get voted in for trying to get a particular idea funded that's going to take away from somebody else. And that's what we don't think about.
And there's an awful lot of politicians getting rich. And that's a whole other topic for a different show. But doing the right thing, that always should come first. That's why we elect these guys. That's why they're in office.
Well,
they should do the right thing to represent all of America.
Well, it's we amen what you just said, by the way. And that's what we got to focus on. And we got to look at both sides of the story. Those of us that would like to see a certain thing be funded, we have to look at it ourselves and say, well, what does that take away from somebody else? We really got to think about that. And then we make good decisions, because cultural decisions, rather than me thing. So, so way to be, you guys. I can't imagine, but we appreciate you telling the story, and I'm sorry we had the audio issues today, Claudia. That I'll figure out a way to get this cleaned up to where it will sound decent. And ladies and gentlemen, you can hear Claudia and Friends on the ReaganRadioNetwork.com or LakeOfTheOzarksRadio.com on at 8 a.m. in the morning, and it's on every day. And Claudia will have more stories for us on this. It's just fascinating to me about what you guys have gone through. You're heroes in our minds because you put yourselves last and everybody else first. So it's time for you guys to be lined up at the beginning of the line. So way to be.
Well, and I know I'm not alone in saying this, and I'll finish with this. We're not heroes. We were there doing what we are drawn to do, what we're trained to do. So we hate being called heroes. Just so that you know, we're not heroes.
Well,
we're just doing a job.
What do I call you then, Claudia? What do I call you?
Call me Claudia. Just don't call me late for dinner.
Okay. Well, okay. I'll just have a secret position in my mind then, okay? And I won't tell you about it.
In my heart, they're all heroes. In my heart, they're all heroes. But, yeah, none of us like being called that. None of us believe that of ourselves.
I had a Navy SEAL tell me that the other day, too. And I'm going, well, I'm going to probably get my butt chewed out a few more times.
But in a good way.
You bet. All right, guys. Anything else you want to say before we let you go?
No, nothing. No, pretty much covered it.
Well, we had a guy on the early part of our show has taught us to love. We love you guys for what you do and what you stand for. We appreciate you. And we hope that you will come on with Claudia again sometime in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. You all rock. All of you. Love you guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Claudia.